Yeah, I'm on. Sorry, I forgot my cap, so I just had to go and grab it.
There we go. There we go. All right, Duncan, let's get started. The groundwork is that top talent, how to find it, how to lock it in, how to make yourself attractive for it. So, but before we start, actually, one of the things that'd be amazing is if you could summarize what you do, why you do it for True versus anybody else. So basically a promo for True, and how did you get into doing it?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Carlos. Yeah, super excited to be here. I think, if I go right back, and then sort of fast forward, I think always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Really wanted to, see when there was opportunities to either do something. And I think, maybe show my age a bit here, but technology and cell phones certainly wasn't around when I was growing up. So always wanted to sort of make sure that I was either buying or selling things, much to my parents, dismiss at times. But I think really, for me, coming into technology and really understanding that, I think when you look at talent and the recruitment industry in general, I think the big challenge is, you need a laptop and a cell phone, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, incredibly unregulated. But also I think people buy from people. And that's one thing I've really enjoyed. And I think, to fast forward a little bit again, conscious if we've got time, but I think the main reason why I joined True is because I've always been looking for a platform that was truly trying to disrupt the industry, and truly trying to be innovative in their collaboration. And I was the 7th employee at True 3 years ago now in Europe. We're 90 in Europe. We're 320 consultants globally in 3 continents. And I think what we've done is Carlos, is really focus. And we're founders. So we started 9 years ago, sketched an idea on a napkin. So seed and Series A is the passion and core of what we do. Now we've taken Casper, Jet, and some massive businesses through IPO and acquisition. We did the first leadership hire at Spotify. We've done over 50 hires for them globally now. We're across 75 of Excel's portfolio. And we're doing a lot of the advisory and communication pieces there. And the way we set up is pretty straightforward. We set up in full stack teams. So we really try and have ownership and accountability from a domain expertise, but also from a subject matter expertise. So we break that down in commercial practices. We have consumer, education, technology, gaming, media, and entertainment, healthcare, life science, enterprise, fintech, and security. And then public. We are in the asset classes. We have public, venture. Venture we call Series C and above, so the high growth, early stage, seed Series A, early B, and then private equity as well. And then the breakdown within there is the functional practices, CEO and board, chair and NED, security, finance and FOP, investment professionals, where we actually do a lot of placing, GPs and LPs as well as principals into the venture and private equity world as well. People, talent, and legal, product data and technology, and sales, marketing, and customer success. So for the last 10 years, I've been doing product data and technology. I've done a few commercial roles, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview and, a little bit of a high-level update on True as well.
So with all that capability within one firm, you could criticize it if you wanted to take that view, or cynical, probably not criticism, it's more of a cynical view as a founder, be like, oh, they do all these things. How can they possibly be good at any one specific thing? So maybe to dispel that myth, what in your opinion makes a good recruiter versus a bad recruiter? What is it that you would recommend for founders to look for in a firm or an individual?
Domain expertise. So I've been doing product data and technology from graduates to C-suite now for the last 10 years. So all as I've been doing is product data and technology. And that has afforded me to look at all the pitfalls. And I think I started, placing graduates in asset management and investment banking.
I'm going to stop you there. So let's assume for a second that you have this experience and everybody's giving you the benefit of the doubt. Now, the problem is you say you have this experience. The next person says they have experience. The next person says they have experience. And yes, you can qualify that. How do you recommend to a founder to discern which is the relevant kind of, what telltale signs would you look for from a fellow recruiter and be like, that guy's good, that guy's bad?
Track record. So, realistically, 90% of the people on this call will want to know, can you do this and how expensive you are when you're bootstrapped or when you're raising early stage funding. And we have, a track record, which we affords us to do. I think our industry over indexes pitch decks and oversells a lot. That we can talk about, use Johnny and Hoppin as a good example. Currently building their leadership team in engineering and product at the moment through their latest crazy valuation. But I think the big thing is track record and references. We're certainly not, we've talked about this at length before. We're not the cheapest, but we're also an advisory business. You don't have to pay for my time. The advice we give is completely free of charge. I see Jack from Picnics on here. Spent an hour with him. And we ended up saying that it's not right for me, but I recommended him someone who could be able to help him as his business. And I think it's those sort of snippets of advice around talent and around strategy, around diversity, around that structure that we're building these platforms to try and be more consultative, right? As opposed to, just sending an invoice and expecting, to people to pay for that. So, the long and short of it is demonstrable references. And, we've got a world-class track record now as the world's largest boutique. And then also, during this pandemic, we've hired another 50 individuals in 6 months and didn't furlough a single employee.
All right. Well, you made a couple of points here I want to dig deeper into. One of them is the ideal customer and some that you think you're not the right fit for. So what is your ideal customer and what is the most dreaded type of customer for you?
I think the short answer is someone who can afford our services. But I guess what I really mean by that is, all jokes aside, is that, actually what we've realized is that the competition and the war on, buying cheap is necessarily the best doesn't always ring true. And, I'm not going to go into names and companies because that's not my style, sir. But, the amount of times we've picked up searches that have been, in the wilderness for a year, 6, 12, 18 months and fill those in 3 months. We've got experience in doing that. And I don't necessarily think we do anything completely different. I think what we've done is taken our North American experience and pulled that into real domain and given us that ability to have, partners across each of those commercial practices I told you about, and then each of those functions. The ideal customer is, listen, at seed and Series A, the best analogy I can think of is it's like trying to give someone, and it depends if the founders are technical or non-technical. There's often some variances there in product data and technology leadership hiring. But I think that you're really asking someone that you've just met to effectively babysit, your child, right? That's the sort of trust that you ultimately need to have with this man or woman because, you're effectively giving them your baby to help you scale it. And I think, there's a real difference between someone's wants and needs in early stage, be it, that if you're an enterprise, that first salesman or woman, if you're, in B2B2C marketplace or and you're in a product focus, that first product hire, you really want that deep domain industry man or woman. And then in data, you want to make sure you're building the right data engineering and data pipelines and data analytics, be it through customer success to capture the additional functionality to product requirements. These men and women are the rock stars of the world today, Carlos, and they are not cheap. And that's a massive thing, is like, if you want the top talent, you really have to be sensible about, the equity you're going to provide, but also the salaries. Because, as a firm, we don't work with the FANGs, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, because they're great hunting grounds for us. And pulling talent out of there has got to be about the right time. But even in some of those big businesses, there's good and bad people in those big tech businesses because you can hide. And be a smaller cog in a big wheel. So the ideal customer for us is someone who trusts us and lets us do the job. But also, we have to do that by, within the first 2 weeks coming up with, a real couple of bullseye candidates and North Stars to really build that trust, right? Because, hiring is everyone's priority, but no one's priority at the same time because you've got so many different competing demands of what you're trying to do in terms of ultimately monetizing the business in an early stage, right?
All right. So you leverage that experience to basically create a brief that is appropriate to find them a candidate. You might audit their brief. You might say, hey, look, this is good, this is bad based on my experience. and then you put a candidate in front of them so that they believe that who the right kind of candidate is. How do you provide guidance on compensation bands? Like maybe do you have any, maybe just throwing some stats out there, like a senior marketing person for a start, what are the typical first few hires that you deal with, and just give some generalities there just for people to sort of have a mental number.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. I think largely from a banding and a leveling perspective, Europe is all over the place. If you look at the consistency in a director, senior director, VP, SVP, and C-suite, there's real consistency in leveling and structure in North America. And we know that because we 90% of what we do at the C-suite level when we're pulling executives, especially in product, has been North American relocation. The last 12 big C-suite searches in product has been pulling that over. We're also actually just doing a piece of compensation data work with Netflix, interestingly, not working for them, but doing an advisory piece. And the consistency in job titles versus salaries is very, very difficult to nail down. What I would say is don't go into market with an idea of a salary band, have an idea of your North Star. But in terms of, if you want numbers, I think you can safely say anywhere between 80 and 120 is sensible for your first leadership hire from a pound perspective. Then you've got to think about, like, if you want that high growth man or woman, how much, of your cap table do you have, and how much are you willing to give this individual? Is it co-founder-esque equity, or is it going to be the standard, 0.5 to 1.5? Or are you actually willing to really say, actually, there's some real gaps missing in our leadership team, and what we're missing is co-founders, and we can use Johnny as a good example about that, is making sure that you're bringing in that talent at the right time to really help build that out. And, you've got to pay for that. So we've had searches that started at let's look at the 120 to 130 candidates. 6 months later, they realized actually they need to pay 250. But I guess our platform, which we developed from scratch, which is a talent management platform called Thrive, is, you have access to that data, and it aggregates that data throughout the search. So, it shows compensation. Obviously, it's illegal in North America to ask what a candidate's earning. But what our talent platform does, and it's a dashboard, which is interactive, is you actually see the candidates, and in Europe, you see what they're currently earning, and more importantly, what their expectations are as well. And, probably a good example is we had a 350K candidate from Google who had spent 9 years in Seattle. He was actually born in Moscow, graduated Master's University. He came home for 150 and 5% of a company. Because everyone's band and risk appetite is negotiable. You've just got to be sensible about really where you're willing to go from a base salary versus skin in the game.
All right. So now I'm going to ask you to park your true search hat aside, and we're like, exactly. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move over to just you. You're in a pub. You're talking to a founder, friend to friend, and these questions I need you to answer because they're going to be assuming that they might already have another recruiter. So you're basically providing guidance on that. So let's start with the first one, which is pricing. The pricing one's probably the most sensitive one at the end of the day, right? Everyone is concerned about how do recruiters price? What is the best format for a founder? If somebody were asking you about that, Adnan asked a question, is like, it's tempting to negotiate all the way down to the wire. How much lower should you go? He's got one at 16%. Is it worth it? Does it reduce the incentive for them to work hard and refer the best candidates? Is there a percentage sweet spot? Just give us some sense from the human being, Duncan, in a pub, talking to friends. You're not even working for True anymore. Mm-hmm. What's your advice?
Well, it's not easy for me to take my True hat off, but it's easy for me to answer outside of True because I'm an advisor in 4 startups. As you know, so taking all those sort of hats off and just focusing on the selfish side, you want to make sure you're getting the best deal. But I think the problem in recruitment is it's, the answer to that, there's a lot to unpick there. I think there's about 5 questions there, Carlos, so I'll try and remember them all. But the one about the 16% is, buy cheap, buy twice is so true in recruitment, but you need someone you can trust. Like, you want to pick up the phone and say, hey, recruiter, I need another Carlos, I need another Precious. And you want them to just have that ability. So selfishly spend time with getting to know them, but people buy from people. Every time I moved to another agency, and I've been at 2 in 8 years, my client list has come with me, because it's the people that buy from the individuals. The sweet spot, I think another question, there was a sweet spot in terms of pricing. In contingency, the best analogy to look at is, if you want to sell your house, do you go to 12 agents, or do you go to one that's really good, advertised on the right platforms like a Zoopla or a Rightmove, and can show you consistently that they've got experience in delivering? I think going back to the trusting, push them on their track record. Give me 3 references of early stage founders where you've done this before. Speak to those founders. How was that recruiter A? How was recruiter B? How did you find their experience? Like, were they honest and open about that? And then I think, if you want to invest, make sure you're investing in people's time. Contingency recruitment's tough, because it's often throwing spaghetti against a wall, and it's first past the post, and it's whoever makes the placement gets the commission. Whereas think about building a strategic relationship with someone, that you trust in professional services, and making sure that, might be worth looking at, giving someone a trial on an exclusive basis, but giving them a time boundary and say, listen, we need 4 or 5 of your best candidates by X amount of time. And then that way, if they build your trust, then you can build a trusted exclusive relationship. And then you can look at the difference between a retainer, so actually being paid for their time, versus actually just, I'm going to go out to 12 agencies, I'm going to go on all the job boards, and I'm just going to wait and see. I can promise you the best candidates in the market ain't on job boards, and they're not actively looking for a job. And this is where I think, if you don't want to go with a fully fledged search firm because of the cost, think about like what I would call polished contingency. So people that have demonstrable experience of niche roles, or actually, market experience in a certain region, in a certain geography, that's really going to help your time, and spend the time up front. But, the answer again is, what part of the service, and I often say this because, what part of the service don't you want if you want a discounted fee? And that's quite hard when you're in the business of selling your product or service for a fee as well. So would you discount your service for other people as well? You got to think of it like, and this is where it's, everyone's had a really shitty, it's being recorded. Everyone's had a really bad experience with a recruiter, right? Because, I think there's real estate salesmen, secondhand car dealers, and then recruiters. And and there are some really bad cowboys and cowgirls, for that matter, in this industry. And I think it's that bad experience which scars you. And it's, once you find a trusted one, you never let them go. And you see time and time again on LinkedIn, loved working with X, loved working with Y. And then I think, at the right time, why not, if you're wanting to scale and you have sort of 5 or 6 roles, to do, why not think about bringing someone in full time as a talent acquisition partner to take a lot of that strain away, to take a lot of that pain away as well.
Yeah, I was going to go into the in-house recruiter. I mean, at what point do you recommend somebody to bring in? Like, what's the typical organizational size, structure, maturity to do that? And then we're going to get into a little bit about some of the other questions that founders have.
Mm-hmm. I think the danger is there. You hire a specialist generalist, so, one day you might be asking to go and find a marketing leader, then a growth hacker, then a VP of sales. And then you might be turning around and going to, getting them to find, another person in HR or another recruiter. I think the short answer is between, if you look at talent as a function and then you separate out HR, L&D, and people, probably when your head count's around 30, in terms of growth, you really start to need to think about, you can outsource a lot of those functions now with some of those fantastic platforms, much like, Seed Legal, who, well, you can outsource a lot of those functions to really take care of that back office pain. So I would say around 30 is when you really start to think about people and teams and that structure. And then thinking about like those first, if you call them C-suite hires or VP hires, if you really want that top talent, you have to go to firms that have been, swimming in that ecosystem for a long time.
Okay, let's talk about different ecosystems now, international ones in particular. And there's going to be like a sub niches of this question. So international hiring, especially now with remote workers, is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
how should you coordinate a search with international searches? Is it one macro recruiter that coordinates others? Do you have multiple? How do you manage that? Do you go for one firm that does a lot of different geographies? Tim asks a variant of this question as hiring staff in London, Berlin is highly competitive. What are locations and what recommendations do you have to look for when it comes to finding product data and technology in terms of locations? But that question, if you think about that question, it's got the two parts, right? Where do you find these people, and how do you coordinate a search for those people?
Yeah. There's two parts to that, and I think that the first part is obviously you want to go with a firm that has a true global footprint. And if I can put my true hat back on here again, the reason why we have such an exciting, we've been harnessing this talent platform called Thrive, which we built us from scratch for 9 years, and I just did a chief data officer for our own company, reporting into our two founders. Now that was stressful. That was really stressful. But we've got a database now of the best, venture and private equity, high growth, individuals across all of those domains that I talked about earlier. And we've cultivated that on our own database over 9 years. We are also physically, as I touched on earlier, in 15 offices, San Fran, LA, Austin, Chicago, Toronto, Boston, New York, Philly, London, Berlin, Stockholm, Tel Aviv, Dubai, Singapore, and Sydney. Like, we really have a global footprint where we're actively speaking every day to the best, I'll use PDT as an example, product data and technology leadership specialists on the planet. So if if you're in Europe, and it'd be nicer if there's more unicorns going that way than coming this way, Carlos, as you well know. Hopefully there's another one coming out of this group here, and I think you're 3 funds, 3 unicorns. So hopefully out of these founders here, there's another one coming in this fund. But I think 90% of our searches at really, if you want the top talent, it starts in North America in product data and technology. And, I think the world breathed a political sigh of relief with the latest American decision. But, what's also interesting about that is, to go back to that second question is, I had probably 22 candidates pull out of searches that were European expats based in North America based on the latest political decision. They said, actually, we're going to stay in America now, and we're going to continue to develop. People are flying out of Silicon Valley. We've just moved 2 executives from Silicon Valley to Berlin, another massive CEO gone from Silicon Valley to Austin. There's massive movement coming out of that ripe talent. And then I think you've got to be sensible about time zones. Johnny's got it right at Hoppin. Johnny's mantra has always been, we're going to hire anyone plus or minus 5 hours from London, and we're just going to hire the best talent in the world, and we're going to build a remote culture. It comes with its challenges, especially even pre-COVID. There was very few successful high-growth remote teams. And then I think it was Tim's question is, listen, we've been debating this for a long time. We did a lot of thought leadership on talent and talent pools. Lisbon, amazing talent. We just did a CTO for a business out there called OutSystems, a low-code development business. They hired 600 engineers, 600 in 6 months out in Lisbon. There's amazing talent in Lisbon. The nearshoring stuff, Uber's got a huge footprint in Sofia. Estonia's doing amazing things. They rebuilt their whole government on blockchain. There's a massive tech hub in there. But I think anywhere now, I think if you're sensible, and we're having a lot of these conversations with our clients, is how much do you really need that man or woman to be in the room every day? Given that, look at where we are now, and look how productive we're being as a society. I still think you need to, especially in PDT, selfishly, you need to be able to whiteboard, user stories, user journeys, product functionality, requirements, and come up with those exciting things. But there's so many different pockets of hubs. Godel Technologies, fantastic nearshoring consultancy, spun up 150 engineers in 6 months for Compare the Market when they were going through crazy growth. Like, there's fantastic pockets of Bristol's a great hub. There's amazing engineers in Bristol. France, Supélec, one of the best engineering universities in the world. And we're doing a lot in France, and there's very, very strong engineers there. I think Berlin is almost as expensive now as London, and the war on talent, is crazy. And probably another stat that no one wants to hear on this call, unfortunately, the average product data and technology man or woman from senior engineer and above stays in a company on average for 27 months before looking for a new challenge if they are not well paid, well incentivized, and in an environment where they feel, I suppose, encouraged as well, which is a frightening stat. Because it's just over 2 years, and how often do you look at someone's profile and think, oh, they're a bit jumpy because they've had 3-year stints?
Thanks for the geography bit. I think you kind of skirted the issue on how to coordinate multiple different recruiting firms. I have frequent conversations about mobile platforms with Miguel. He always evangelizes one, doesn't always give me a good answer. Every time we get into a debate as to one, he just tells me I have the right one. And you answered, you just have to find the right firm, and True is the right firm. So I'm going to repeat the question. Firm is not an option. True is not an option in this scenario. You have to give me how you would coordinate 1 or 2 or 3 recruiters, especially on these kind of international remote works. What's the best advice you have there on managing that flow?
To look, are you asking for the same role, or are you saying for, say, 3 different roles in 3 different locations? Because they're quite different answers.
Yeah, 3, like the same role in 3 different. Like you realize that there's a pool of people in Bulgaria, and you realize that there's local recruiters there probably know that scene a lot better than True. That's debatable, but you know what I mean. So you have how do you manage that? Like, how do you your tips there?
Well, contractually, it's going to be expensive for you if you engage with 3 different search firms because they want a retainer. But then contingency wise, how would you feel if you had 3 different? If you went to sell your product or service somewhere and they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to use 2 other people as well to do the same job that we're effectively paying you to do." I think the answer is tough, Carlos, because I certainly, if someone turns around and says to me, "Hey, we're going to use True, but we're also going to use a local firm, and we're also going to use another firm in another country," I would say, the reason why True is successful because we have that coverage. But I think there's, you would have to be open and honest about. I think you need to be transparent. Would be the thing, because there's nothing worse as a recruiter than especially in contingency, right, where you're not paid for your time, you're paid on success. And think about that again. And I urge you to find someone that you can give them an exclusive relationship or an exclusive opportunity to prove themselves, because, there'd be nothing worse than, you have a pool of researchers going and, speaking to people in Sofia, and they go, "Oh, someone's already talked to me about that role." But then that as the founder or the person who's engaged with these two or 3 recruiters, you've decided not to be transparent about that. How would that make them feel? So I think the answer is it's openness and transparency. I've never been in that situation because I've always tried to, make sure that, if we don't have the coverage, and this is, I'm sure you know this, Carlos, I'm speaking to Uber about a leadership role in Sofia at the moment, and I'm telling them we've never done that before. And if you want someone in Sofia, we are not the best agency for you. But if you want the best talent anywhere remotely in Europe, then that's in our wheelhouse. And I think being transparent about that as well, because, that once again, it's everyone's most important thing is recruiting, but it's also, it's at the top of the list and the bottom of the list at the same time.
All right. Well, moving to 2 questions from our founders. Carl Moritz, I've seen you jumping in and out because I think your connectivity, so hopefully you hear this, but how do you determine whether a given role warrants a recruiter? Is this a function of seniority, in-house expertise in judging candidates?
Yeah, I think
yeah, go ahead.
I think, to unpick that, it's case by case. It depends on how experienced the founders are, I think, is the short answer. Like, have they hired before? Do they know what good looks like? Do they have the time? I think time's the big thing. The opportunity cost of putting time into recruitment, is the reason why we have a job in our industry, right? Because you save so much time so the early stage founders can get on with doing, what they do. And I think, once again, if you come from, and I'll use Johnny again as an example. Johnny's not a product guy. Johnny graduated from Manchester University, as you well know, in 2016, and he grew up, in this crazy hyper-growth environment, meant to be a hybrid world, and then all of a sudden got thrown into the deep end of crazy growth. But like he came to me that day, he's like, "Listen, I need a product leader now, a real seasoned product leader in enterprise SaaS, and to help me grow, hop, and explore the B2B2C marketplace." like it's about knowing at the right time when to bring in that experience and when you don't have it. And I think most engineering-led founders will think they know what good product software leadership looks like, but it's about making sure that you know when's the right time to bring in a product owner or a product manager or a domain expert across consumer, across B2B2C marketplace, and across enterprise SaaS, because they're all very different. And my experience in hiring in those are they all are, the framework and methodologies across those might be quite consistent, but they're also all very, very different in terms of the different types. So I think you got to make sure you're comfortable knowing what good looks like. You're comfortable understanding how to do that. And I've just seen a question pop up around behavioral and I think leadership. And I think even more so now when you can't physically meet face to face in this COVID world, how do you ultimately trust someone? And then how do you know? Like we're trying to convince people at the moment to move from North America to the other side of the world over 6 or 7 hours of video conferencing interviews. That's hard. Like how do you really ultimately be able to trust someone to make that decision? But I think you've got to look at yourself in the eyes and think, do I have the time to do this recruitment, or should I outsource it to a professional? Or have I done this before? I think if you're a first-time founder and you think you know what you're looking for, I think it can't hurt to go and have conversations with someone in the industry who can give you open and honest advice. And I think that's where, as you well know, Carlos, I don't send you an invoice at the end of giving anyone advice. I truly enjoy seeing early stage businesses succeed.
On the last point you briefly talked about regarding the question that Pat presented was around determining the effectiveness of a potential hire, especially now that you're not meeting them in person. So it's kind of a blend of two questions. One that Sumanta had about testing for effectiveness, and then Pat's question is around using behavioral and psychometric tests, I guess, as a proxy for determining effectiveness. And people can sometimes react kind of funny to those questions. What are your thoughts on those tools and determining the effectiveness of a hire?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there was a gap in the market that we saw massively about 5 years ago, and with two amazing female psychologists who grew up through the army in Tel Aviv and Israel, we developed the world's first machine learning AI and psychometric assessment tool that wasn't a square peg round hole type assessment. And I've done them all. When you get your assessments and you go through the different ones, it depends on what you want to get out of that. I think it's important to know why, obviously look at what an assessment can give you, and then the reasons, what you're trying to achieve out of that assessment. I think you'll get more out of a live interactive whiteboard session, out of a case study, out of what you're trying to get, like in any domain, marketing, sales, people, getting an understanding of how they work through the interview process, like giving them a case study, getting them to present. You understand their communication style, their skill set. But obviously, of course, there might be some more psychometric things, but how well, in reality, how well can you really know someone off, 6 hours, say, of video interviews? The answer is there's an element of trust, and there's an element of, obviously referencing. I don't believe in what our industry does a lot. It's called back channeling. I think you meet enough people, someone's going to say they didn't like you. That's human nature. But, you tell a lot from a candidate when you get references, and you have an open, honest conversation with those people about the references. What was he or she like? How did they work? Talk to them about where you feel, but also have the openness and honesty if you're in early stage to talk to the candidate. I think a massive part of my journey and what we do with candidates is say, hey, Carlos, Precious really liked this, and this, but wasn't sure about this, and this. How would you like to approach that? And too often, people don't give open and honest feedback throughout the process, and you don't give that candidate a chance to, something could be taken out of context. Don't have it out with them, but think about it in the real world. You're going to be wanting to have open, honest conversations with these people. So make sure you feel like you can have that rapport and challenge them, but they can equally challenge you. Because, in this early stage, you're going to want this man or woman to go into war for you, right? Because you know everyone's in the trenches at the start. Everyone's rolling up their sleeves, and you need that guy or girl that can come in at 5,000 feet and scale to 40,000. So I think, listen, synthesis is an incredible tool. I've been through it myself. It's frightening, the results that they come back with. And it's an open book. It's 90 minutes of open book questions. It gets looked at by 4 psychologists, and then machine learning and AI database tool that we've developed. But, it's got to be case by case. You got to know what you're going to get out of them. And it's also a cost to the business.
How much does it end up just being a gut decision? Alexander was asking this question. Is it just ultimately, after all this stuff, after all the people you've met, Duncan, is it just a gut decision in the end?
100%. The first interview, when I'm designing an interview process with early stage founders, have an informal, formal 45 minutes to an hour with the man or woman, and walk away thinking, do I like that person? Forget about their talent, forget about their skills, forget about their assessment that a recruiter would build for you, forget about that alignment. Just have a normal conversation and then start the formal interview process, because you have to, why are you all here today? Because you had a gut feel about an opportunity in the market, and you raise funding. So it's just about making sure you feel comfortable with that person. Like when me and you first met, Carlos, there was just an instant rapport and a connection, and we've been building that relationship ever since. And I think, if that meeting didn't go well, we wouldn't have continued to stay in touch with each other. You've got to vibe with someone, but you've also got to ultimately walk away thinking, do I like that person? And if you don't, it's hard in an early stage business. Think about your co-founders. You ultimately like them most of the time.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point to end on. Thank you for joining us, Duncan.
You're welcome.